Um, as we know, many people have gone through a lot of rehabs, and you yourself have, but you know so many people, and I think most of us know people who have gone through multiple rehabs without success. So, could you give us a short introduction to the different flavors and maybe some advice to a person who might be shopping?
Sure. Yeah. I went to, in 2011, I had health insurance and I went to a quote unquote fancy rehab. And it was fun. And they took us to the beach and they had acupuncture and they had all kinds of, fancy things. But I didn't even stay sober within the rehab. I mean, I was getting high in the rehab. Um, and I'm not some sort of like anti-capitalist or anything, but I just don't think for-profit rehab works because you can't purchase recovery from addiction. I mean, it just can't be purchased. If you had $1 million versus $1 billion to spend on getting someone sober, it wouldn't make any difference. It would make zero difference.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, it's just this very rare thing. It's like love. Like you can't purchase love. You can't purchase a feeling. You can't purchase a desire to stop destroying your life.
So then where does the motivation come from, or whatever word you would use for it? I don't know if you would call it motivation.
Well, when I went to this rehab that was kind of a state facility nonprofit, not fancy, no acupuncture, no hot tubs, there was cleaning toilets, there was upkeep of the building. Um, there was, we had we didn't want to do because this place had no money. Um, and that's where the magic happened. I mean, I basically became part of a community. And I'm still a part of the community. Cry Help, which is spelled CRI
Wow.
Help.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a nonprofit facility, and
Okay.
because of that, there was just a sense of community and a sense of family. And I put work into that place, and I have a family that I still consider my family. 5 years after going there, I'm still connected with the facility, and a big part of that facility was that once you first of all, it was long term. It wasn't like we're going to bill your insurance for 28 days and then kick you out. It was long term. They wanted you to stay as long as possible, and the longer you stayed, they didn't make more money, from you staying long. They wanted you to stay there for 6 months, you know, and they used to want you to stay there for a year, but that was I don't think that's excessive, but in terms of funding, I guess it was excessive. But they wanted to transform you. That was the goal, and the goal wasn't to these for-profit rehabs will their goal is to bill your insurance. And so they get you in there, they put you on 12 different drugs to knock you out for 28 days so you don't make a fuss, you don't complain. They just want to drug you up, have you sleep. I've worked at them. They just want you to sleep in the corner for 28 days while they bill your insurance $4,000 a day. And that doesn't work. So this place didn't do that. I did a lot of things. I did a lot, incredible amounts of group therapy, working on myself. There was 12-step based things going on. But the biggest part, I think, was that people that graduated this place were encouraged to come back and hang out, and not only hang out, but take existing clients out to, take them to Hollywood Boulevard, take them to a recovery meeting. There was like this thing where it's like, once you leave here, like you don't really leave. Like, and it's not because you're forced, it's because you want to keep coming back. And
Wow, that's
yeah.
great. So, speaking of this being family, so can we talk a bit about your family? I've read a bit of your writing, and you mentioned that your parents were drug addicts. So, can you tell us a little bit about this? And just to put it in context, my books are all about how our brain is wired from early experience. So, this is not to blame your parents, but to understand how each brain is wired from early experience.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my parents were heroin addicts, and I do think it played a role in the way that my brain works, obviously. And my parents were, recreational drug users through their teenage years and 20s. And my dad had struggled with on and off heroin addiction, and sort of cleaned it up before they had me. And then when I was about 3 or 4, they got back into heroin, and they used heroin, heavily. And And when I was about 7 or 8, they started smoking crack cocaine, which is an odd habit to pick up in your 40s, but they did. And
with the heroin.
with the heroin, yeah. And the way they actually got into crack cocaine was because they were trying to quit heroin. They got on methadone. And I'm not trying to, dog on methadone, but the methadone system is odd where you have to go to a methadone clinic every morning. And guess who hangs out at methadone clinics? I mean, not the greatest people. And one thing led to another. And my parents at like the age of 43 tried crack cocaine through a friend they had met at the methadone clinic. So, yeah, things were odd. I had to compete with drugs to get my parents' attention, basically. My parents raised me well. I think. I think I was raised a lot better than a lot of people I know that didn't have drug addict parents. But it was I had behaviors that I acted out to get attention. I fantasized about, I lived in a fantasy world of WWF wrestling and video games, and escaped my own reality because I lived in a crack house basically until I was 12. And then I was adopted by my aunt in Oakland, California, and I moved to Oakland and had a normal high school experience. Yeah.
Which high school?
I actually got adopted by her in 2001, and she was living in Piedmont. So I was like incredibly fortunate. I went from a crack house in Boston to Piedmont, California, where I went to high school with a lot of, relatively wealthy people. And it was a complete culture shock. And, but it was good. I learned about things like kale and the opera house. And, I grew up in a blue collar, drug addicted Boston, Carpenters Union family, and completely changed worlds and saw, a different side of life when I moved.
Good, good. Well, so that was a really good description. I'm not even going to add to that. So,
Okay.
my work is about teaching people how good feelings are caused by dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphin. And these are each separate good feelings that reward specific behaviors that promote survival in the animal world.
Mm-hmm.
And although people like to put this virtuous spin on happiness and link it to higher values, that when you know what triggers these chemicals in animals, it's easy to see what your brain is really trying to motivate you to do. And
Yeah.
when we're young, our brain, you could think of it like Play-Doh, like that the pathways are easy to build because you have a lot of neuroplasticity. And that builds the pathways, then things harden. And so you tend to repeat the early behaviors. So you had one layer of early behaviors before you were 12, and then you have another layer of behaviors after you were 12. So at least you had these various resources to build on once you were able to stop putting the drugs in your system. Now,
Yeah.
you said that when you finally decided to change, you felt like all these bad things were happening to get you to realize that you were hurting yourself. But a lot of people don't acknowledge that they even have a choice. They keep hurting themselves and they imagine that the world is doing it to them, and then they don't see that they've made a choice in this. So how would you explain to a person that needs to know this, that they're making a choice?
Well, I definitely felt that way too. I mean, everything I was homeless because my family disowned me. It wasn't because I was a vicious drug addict. I ended up in jail because, the police were out to get me for some reason, and or I couldn't afford a lawyer, or, just everything was like someone else's fault, and the world owed me because I had a bad childhood. I felt that, well, I was owed something, and this expressed itself in my teenage years. I'd steal things. I went to school with a bunch of rich kids, and I'd steal things out of lockers, and it was because the world owed me that. is what I thought. So listen, I'm just really lucky that I had that thought process for every bad thing that happened in my life, even though I was completely responsible for it when I was homeless and all that, where I actually had to wake up in situations where I had done horrible things to myself physically in a blackout. I'd black out on drugs, and like the example I used, I woke up, I was missing a toe. Well, I was the guilty person of that. I removed it in a blackout. And I consider myself incredibly lucky that that happened. And I can't hand that experience to a lot of these people, but all I can do is try to tell them that this is how bad it had to get so bad for me. And my denial had to become so great that it was my responsibility for all this bad stuff happening, that I had to wake up from a blackout and look at one of the most basic experiences or examples of I did physical damage to my own body as a result of using drugs. That clicked for me. That clicked. Not everyone's going to be as lucky as me and have something that basic to look at.
But so when you looked at that missing toe, you said, I made the choice to do that, but it's possible to make a different choice. And
yeah.
And yet you've written this very interesting Substack series on three friends of yours who keep making the bad choice. And I assume that you've tried to talk to them, and yet they keep making the bad choice. So I'm really just trying to learn from you, because I'm basically doing the same thing of like talking to people who make bad choices and don't see that they have an alternative.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my three friends that I wrote about, they're in some capacity, all three of them are being coddled or enabled. Um, and I'm in contact with all their family. I mean, because their family calls me, because I'm not an expert on much, but they view me as an expert of getting off drugs. Just because I did it. Millions of people have done that, but they know me, so they feel, and I'm happy to talk to them. But a lot of them don't want to hear when I tell them what I think. They can't really accept it. I tell them, hey, you can't enable this behavior. You're enabling this behavior when you put up with it, when you buy them hotels, when you pay their rent, when you kind of find blame in yourself for some reason. You can't do that. But it's very hard. It's very hard not to do that. One of my friends is a female, and she's become homeless, and I couldn't imagine having a daughter and having someone tell me, you have to stop coddling that daughter. Well, what could happen to her? She's out on the street. And I've told this mother to call the police. I said, call the police. She's threatening to kill you. She's in meth psychosis. Call the police. They should take her to jail. But I guess they don't do that anymore. I don't know. If you threaten to kill someone, they used to take you to jail or put you on a 5150 hold. They wouldn't do it. They said, we don't do that anymore. I don't know if it's because of funding, if it's going, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. But sometimes when someone's in the grip of drugs, you just need to remove them from drugs for 2 days, 3 days, and they're a lot more sensible. And that was, people have called the police on me, and I've been 5150, locked in a room for 3 days, and came off the drugs. And what do you know? I had some sense about me, at the end of that. So,
but then a lot of them, maybe a few days later, they just go out and look for more drugs. So
yeah.
just withdrawal is not enough in and of itself. We've seen.
Oh, no, I don't think so. And that's why, like my friend that was a female that is homeless right now, like she's threatening to kill people. She's threatening to kill herself. She's homeless on drugs. That person should get, 5150 assessed, by a doctor. It will be noted that, okay, this person is wildly addicted to drugs and homeless in the street. This person needs to be mandated to like detox or treatment or something. I mean, you can't force someone to get sober, but you can. I don't know what else to do. I mean, you can't just like let people run in the street and kind of just slowly kill themselves in front of everybody with no consequences. So the best thing I can think of is, well, let's mandate this person to drug treatment instead of jail. Like, jail isn't a cure-all. Absolutely. I mean, we know this. Very rarely does it go backwards.
Exactly. And so you mentioned about the high-end rehabs where you are given legal drugs and you're medicated. Did that happen to you?
Yes. At that rehab, they gave me Seroquel. Um, but not only did they give me Seroquel to knock me out so I wouldn't make a fuss, I left with Seroquel. I mean, they gave me, it's like, what? I'm not schizophrenic. Why would I have a prescription of Seroquel? Um, that's insane, you know. And
And they
this is,
expected you to be on it for life, right?
I guess, I I don't know why they put me on it in the first place, but I worked at a rehab where we had a doctor, and I would do intakes of new clients all the time, and we do a little Zoom meeting with the doctor. The doctor would talk to him for 6-7 minutes, and then what do you know? Like a coincidence, every time they just prescribe them the same 9 drugs to every single person that came to that rehab. It was just a one size fits all. I didn't see one patient not get prescribed Seroquel. Uh, yeah.
Wow.
And people don't know what Seroquel is. I mean, these were
Yeah.
kids from Indiana that just got on a plane to Hollywood to go to rehab, and they don't know what Seroquel is. And now they're on
Yeah.
Seroquel. It's like, Seroquel is an incredibly powerful antipsychotic drug for people with schizophrenia, typically.
Yeah, yeah, and it knocks you out,
Um,
like you said. And then when it knocks you out, you're not in a mode for building new skills to turn on your happy chemicals in healthy ways. So
yeah.
you have no sense of realistic, sustainable paths to happiness. So that's why you think either zombie or high, zombie or high. It seems like the only choice. So
Yeah.
it's very unfortunate. So this place you mentioned, was this like a reputable place, like a licensed,
Oh,
known?
of course. Yeah. No, this wasn't even a bad rehab. I mean, there's rehabs where you go there for 28 days and they realize that you have to leave, and they'll tell you, hey, if you go out and relapse right now, we can do another 28 days if you don't want to leave. If you're, and in some cases they'll pay you to relapse. They'll pay you to, they'll give you $500 to relapse so they can set you up on your insurance. Your insurance will pay another 28 days. This is an incredible industry with uh, billions and billions of dollars floating around. I mean, just in Los Angeles County alone, there's got to be 1,000 rehabs. I don't know, hundreds of rehabs. Um, I believe in profit incentive for almost everything. Uh, you know, if you want to buy a car, the competition between two car companies, if they're motivated to make a profit, they're going to make a better. If they're motivated to make a profit, they're going to make a better product to get you to purchase that product. But you can't, like I said earlier, you can't purchase this. Um, so they're incentivized to just sort of have you not leave. That's their goal, is to get you to not leave the rehab. And how do you get someone to not leave a rehab? Well, you give them an Olympic-sized swimming pool and a mansion in Hollywood.
But then it's the same with homeless programs, that people who are quote unquote homeless advocates who work for these agencies. What's your experience with them?
Well, when I was on Skid Row, I I didn't use, this was not as big when I was on Skid Row, but there's people that, yes, like now have a career out of like maintaining homelessness, it seems like, or helping, but also there's like a fine line between helping and sort of hurting and enabling, in my opinion. And I didn't have a lot of experience with this, but I stayed at homeless shelters. I was at a midnight mission for 6 months, which is a nonprofit. It's not like it was a sobriety based nonprofit. Hey, are you homeless? Well, you can come live in here, but you can't smoke crack anymore. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And I did it. I lived there for 6 months. Um, that place was getting some funding from the state, but the state, the laws changed in California where basically if you're pushing abstinence based or sobriety based um, help for homeless people and you're providing housing in the equation, you don't receive funding anymore. So the only way to receive funding is to not push an abstinence based, sobriety based housing program. Um, and it's unfortunate, and a lot of places are like, I live in Austin. I go downtown to to one where my friend works, and it's like you can just live there and get high, and people die in there. I mean, it's, you know, twice I've gone and there's been like a body laying there, and they're like carrying a body out. But listen, people are gonna die at sobriety based programs too. But the problem is that like this is such negative incentivization to clean up, you know, get off drugs. Um, this is a powerful thing that we're dealing with in terms of drug addiction. I mean, this is, you'll fight anybody. I mean, you'll kill to get your drug. And if you have complete incentivization to just keep doing that, you'll never stop, you know?